Hello, my name is Sawyer Wells, and this is my presentation on disabilities in the prison system. So, how does the prison system include people with disabilities? A 2016 study found that 40.4% of incarcerated individuals reported a psychiatric disability, and 56% reported a non psychiatric disability. Although these numbers can be somewhat unreliable due to poor and inaccurate polling, as well as prison records not being accurate, and prisons not caring to keep accurate numbers about the number of disabled people within their walls. The main types of disabilities featured are cognitive disabilities, which include intellectual disabilities, learning disabilities, and dementia, physical disabilities, including movement, vision, and hearing impairments, and mental illness, which includes a wide range of mental illnesses. High rates of PTSD, depression, and substance use disorders are also reported. All of these combined to create a wide range of people with disabilities in our current prison system. So, how are people with disabilities in prison represented in the media? Largely, they are underrepresented, which is insane due to how many people there are incarcerated in every prison with disabilities. But the underrepresentation can be chalked up to a lack of coverage and silenced voices. As far as lack of coverage, media sources rarely report on disabled experiences despite the fact they make up a large portion of incarcerated individuals. This is usually because disabled people are seen as less than human, or their disability is seen as the problem that needs to be rehabilitated in the first place. As far as silenced voices, stories are often told about people with disabilities rather than by them, meaning that the people who create content about disabled people in prison rarely consult or reflect on the actual experiences of disabled people in prison. First person perspectives from disabled incarcerated people are almost non existent in mainstream media. The media uses stereotypes and simplified narratives to reduce mental illness to multiple tropes. The first one is mental illness is dangerous, which is where people with mental disabilities are shown and often framed as violent or unpredictable, reinforcing a stigma rather than generating understanding. The second trope is pity or villain tropes. Disabled prisoners are portrayed either as helpless victims or as manipulative and deceitful. Both narratives strip them of complexity and individuality, and hurt the image of the character by reducing them to something for entertainment rather than focusing on the real struggles somebody in prison might face with a disability. The final trope is a focus on exceptionalism, where the media spotlights one individual as an inspiring exception while ignoring the broader systematic issues impacting disabled people in prison. This is probably the most common depiction of disabled people in prison, as it creates an inspiring and dramatic story while reducing somebody's struggle to a one-dimensional version. People with disabilities are represented in the media often with a lack of systematic context. This ignores structural harm, where the media often fails to explore how prisons are disabling institutions that promote harm to people with disabilities rather than including and accommodating them. This is further proven by the lack of coverage of medical neglect and abuse, where there are very little coverage of the lack of accommodations or healthcare in prisons, and the lack of accommodations rarely surface, only coming up in high-profile lawsuits or abuse cases, making the coverage of disabled people in prison not reflective of day-to-day realities, where prisoners are often subjected to abusive conditions. However, there is advocacy in alternative media. Disability justice groups have tried to shift the narrative by highlighting systematic neglect and the need to decarcerate disabled people, and independent documentaries and blogs provide deeper, more human portrayals, particularly those involving formerly incarcerated disabled people telling their own stories. This advocacy in alternative media is incredibly important, as it can show a real, true human form of people with disabilities in prison that doesn't chalk them up to stereotypes or sensationalize them for monetary reasons. The first piece of media I would like to discuss is the movie Green Mile, where the character of John Coffey, a convicted murderer, is portrayed as having some kind of mental disability and is shown as being very simple-minded and innocent. He is often treated like a child both in the film and by the writers. And we slowly find out that he is an innocent person who is some kind of special healer who has exceptional powers and is a wonderful, kind-hearted soul. This falls into the exceptionalism trope by showing John as the good one in a prison full of bad people. And while this seems like an immensely positive depiction of a disabled character, positive stereotypes are still damaging stereotypes, as John is shown as a childish, one dimensional character whose pain and struggles are depicted but not fully explored, and whose actions are chalked up to being simple minded and innocent. The next piece of media I would like to discuss is the film On the Outs, which shows the story of three young women who are trying to navigate the world of juvenile prison, rehabilitation, and recovery. The film portrays multiple disabilities, including vision impairment, brain injury, and mental illness, and it shows the challenges faced by disabled people in prison and re entering society. It also explores addiction as a disability rather than a criminal issue, where addicts are usually seen as the problem rather than having something that needs to be healed within themselves. It shows the prison system as punitive rather than rehabilitating and highlights the lack of mental health support, counseling, or disability accommodations in the facility. Overall, the film does an excellent job of exploring the world of disabilities behind bars while also telling true to life human stories that do a good job portraying disabled people as multifaceted individuals and not just a stereotype to be sensationalized. The final piece of media I would like to discuss is the TV show Oz, which documents a fictional prison and what goes on behind bars within. Oz uses disability for narrative drama, and characters with disabilities serve as symbols of vulnerability, punishment, and moral transformation. Disabilities are often shown as a fall from power or change in character, whereas characters pick up disabilities either through violence, malnutrition, or general abuse, it is seen as a weakness and a point of recovery that the prisoner must then overcome. The TV show does not discuss and, in fact, outright ignores the rights of disabled prisoners, often depicting them as weak and unfit for society while ignoring their needs and the complications that may come from existing or newly found disabilities. This means that Oz falls into the mental illness equals dangerous trope, pity, and villain tropes, as it shows that disabled people are dangerous individuals, or people to be pitied, or the villain. Do people with disabilities feel they are accommodated or treated fairly in prison? The overwhelming answer is no. People with disabilities in prison feel that they are abused, discriminated, and looked down upon for their disability. Rather than being seen as an individual who might need special treatment or care due to their specific condition, their condition is seen as a weakness that needs to be rubbed out before they are allowed to be reintegrated into society. And when they leave prison, their disability combines with their criminal record to make it nearly impossible for them to return to any semblance of a normal life. The two perspectives we will look at today are Chris Huff and Efferson Williams. Chris Huff is a disabled man from Chicago who self-describes as having an information processing problem. He was easily triggered by confinement, leading to intense depression as he couldn't process information properly, therefore meaning he couldn't communicate properly with fellow inmates or guards. He did not receive any acknowledgement of his disability in prison, and his disability was viewed as a barrier to him being a member of society, even by his own lawyer. He states that, quote, "My experience is a system that is one of punishment and not of rehabilitation, one of condemnation rather than redemption." Efferson Williams, also a disabled man from Chicago, lost the ability to move his lower body after being shot in the leg. He describes the troubles he faced after incarceration, being unable to find a house, feeling hatred from society because he's in a wheelchair, and unable to get a job due to his disability and criminal record. He states, quote, "People are being sent back out with several barriers to face and no direction to navigate these obstacles, particularly if they have a disability." So how could the media better represent people with disabilities in prison? The first step would be to highlight the structural and systematic issues by allowing the media to cover poverty, lack of access and community-based care, and criminalization of mental illness, contributing to incarceration, especially for disabled people. Instead of portraying a disabled prisoner as merely a burden or problem, narratives could explore how policy decisions force disabled people into prison. The media should avoid stereotypes and sensationalization by showing disabled prisoners as multifaceted individuals that have their own unique experiences and not as one-dimensional characters to be viewed upon as sensationalized. And should include disabled voices in storytelling, using authentic representation both in actors, directors, writers, and all members of the cast. That is it. Thank you.